There is a skeleton in a cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iran. It is roughly 47,000 years old, and buried beside it, tucked deliberately under the arm of the dead, are the seeds and stems of at least 8 different medicinal plants. Ephedra groundsel grape hyacinth, plants that researchers have since confirmed contain psychoactive and stimulant compounds. The burial was not random. Someone chose these plants specifically. Someone knew what they did to the human mind, and someone decided that whatever they did was important enough to take into the afterlife. They've been altering our brain chemistry on purpose for as long as we have been human. The question researchers are now asking is not whether ancient humans had addictions. The question is whether the human brain was already built to become addicted, long before any of us had a choice in the matter. Addiction in the clinical sense is not complicated. It is the compulsive pursuit of a reward stimulus, despite negative consequences. In that system, the reward circuit, dopamine loop that connects craving to action to relief to craving again, is not a modern invention. It is one of the oldest and most conserved systems. The vertebrate brain. Rats have it. Fish have it. The circuit that can trap a modern human. The cycle of dependency is the exact same circuit that helped your ancestor remember where the best food was, drive themselves to go back there every day. The brain does not distinguish between a nutritional reward and a chemical one. Both activate dopamine release. Both teach the brain that the behavior that preceded the reward is worth repeating, and both can, under the right conditions, escalate from preference to compulsion. Ancient humans discovered this the same way they discovered everything else, by accident and then by intention. The oldest confirmed evidence of deliberate psychoactive plant use dates to roughly 12,000 years ago, in the form of residue found in stone bowls, a burial site in the Judean desert. But accidental exposure almost certainly happened much earlier. Fermented fruit, overripe and producing ethanol, have been a natural part of the environment for every primate ancestor we have ever had. Researchers have identified a specific genetic mutation, a common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas, that occurred roughly 10 million years ago. A mutation in the ADH4 enzyme that dramatically increased the ability to metabolize ethanol. Our bodies were adapted to process alcohol before we ever learned to make it deliberately, which means the pleasurable response to fermented fruit is not a bug in human biology. It is a feature that was already millions of years old. When the first human walked upright, by the time of the Neolithic Revolution, roughly 12,000 years ago, humans were not just consuming psychoactive substances accidentally. They were cultivating them. Some researchers now argue the earliest domesticated grains were grown not primarily for bread, but for beer. The evidence is genuinely contested, but the supporting case is strong. Beer production requires deliberate grain cultivation, storage, fermentation knowledge, and specialized vessels. At sites like Göbekli Tepe in what is now Turkey, some of the earliest evidence of large-scale human gathering, grain storage, appears alongside stone vessels consistent with fermentation. At a site that predates conventional farming by centuries, people came together. They may have come together partly to drink, but beer was not the only substance ancient humans pursued with something that looks distinctly like addiction. The tobacco plant was being cultivated and smoked in the Americas by at least 12,000 years ago. Coca leaves, which contain cocaine alkaloids, being chewed in South America by 6,000 BC. Opium poppies were in deliberate cultivation in the Mediterranean by around 5,000 BC, specifically for their psychoactive properties, and cannabis was in agricultural use in East Asia by at least 12,000 years ago. What is striking about this list is not that humans discovered these plants. What is striking is how quickly, in every case, the relationship moved from discovery to deliberate cultivation to integration into the deepest social and spiritual structures of the culture. Every one of these substances, in virtually every culture that encountered it, was not initially considered a problem. It was considered sacred. The coca leaf was offered to the gods in Andean ceremonies, thousands of years before anyone thought of refining it. Opium was associated with healing, divinity, and the passage between life and death. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, cannabis was one of the sacred plants listed in the Atharva Veda. Peyote was the center of entire religious traditions across Mesoamerica. Alcohol appeared in ritual contexts in virtually every culture that produced it, before it appeared in recreational ones. And this matters because it tells us something important about how ancient humans managed the addictive potential of these substances. They did not manage it through abstinence. They managed it through context, through ritual, through social structure. You consume the substance in a specific place, at a specific time, specific people, for a specific purpose. The context imposed limits that individual willpower alone could not. Ancient humans who got it wrong paid immediately. A hunter who spent 3 days in an altered state could not hunt, could not guard the camp, could not contribute to the group that kept him alive. The social and physical consequences of genuine dependency, fast and visible, in a way that modern dependency often is not. Lose your job slowly over 6 months. The connection to the substance is harder to see. Fail to bring back food for 3 consecutive days. In a band of 50 people, the connection is obvious to everyone, including you. Anthropologists studying skeletal remains from early human populations found something that lines up with this pattern. Evidence of nutritional deficiency, of disrupted activity patterns, of individuals who appear to have withdrawn from normal group functioning, shows up in the archaeological record, rarely in isolation. It almost always clusters around periods of social disruption. The death of a group leader, migration into a new territory. Conflict with a neighboring group. Dependency and ancient humans seem to cluster around the same thing it clusters around now. Why is this? Instability. The loss of the structure that made the craving manageable. Problem is what happened when those contexts collapsed entirely. Anthropologists studying the introduction of alcohol, populations that had no prior cultural frameworks for managing it, found catastrophic outcomes, not because the people were weaker or less capable, those with longer drinking traditions, but because the container was missing. The ritual scaffolding had evolved over thousands of years to make the substance survivable had not been passed along with the substance itself. The drug arrived without the culture, how to learn to contain it. This is the part of the story that does not get told enough. Ancient humans did not just accidentally discover addictive substances, immediately fall into dependency. They built elaborate social, spiritual, and ceremonial structures around those substances over thousands of years, precisely because they had learned, through painful trial and error, that the substances without the structure were dangerous. The structure was the medicine. Substance alone was the problem. And then consider this. The substances that ancient humans developed ritual structures around were mostly plant-based and relatively slow-acting. Compounds most responsible for modern addiction crises are synthesized, concentrated, and engineered to hit the reward circuit faster and harder than anything that exists in nature. The brain that evolved to handle accidental exposure to fermented fruit over millions of years, now dealing with substances specifically designed to overwhelm every regulation system it has. The mismatch is not a failure of character, it is a biological ambush. Your brain has not changed meaningfully since any of this happened. Dopamine circuit that made a hunter-gatherer willing to travel 3 days for a plant that made them feel like the world made sense. The same circuit that operates inside you right now. The craving is ancient. The context that once contained it is mostly gone. Substances it now encounters are stronger than anything the circuit was ever built to resist. What replaced the ritual scaffolding is not nothing, but it is much thinner. The circuit does not know the difference.